Hey there, Earth Science students. So, for some of you, you're going to be able to fast forward through this. And first hour, we're a little bit farther ahead. So, you can move past the stuff here that we already did in class. But for my other hours, I'll have you, for second hour, I'll have you start here. So, I believe when I left off with you, we were at the 100 kilometer or the 100,000 meter mark, and that looked about like, get to that, about like this. All right. So, again, natural structures that we can see, we see Swan Lake, we see the Cottonwood River here, we see the Minnesota River. As far as man made structures, we can see towns. All right, that's what, and we can see roads. That's what all those are. That's what all those little boxes are too. Most of those are gravel roads. All right, so the next one we're going to do is go out to the 100,000 or 1 million meter mark, or 1,000 kilometers. So I'm going to go out here. One thing I'll also point out is down here, and how it says Landsat. I'm going to zoom in real quick so you can see this change. So right down here at the very, very bottom, it's hard to maybe see in the back, but it says imagery date 6/15/21 newer. What that means is that these images that I'm seeing right here were taken from June 15th of just this last summer. And so these are aerial photos that airplanes take as they fly over. And airplanes can only go up, so high though. And at some point, they can't go up that high. And then we rely on satellites. So right after this mark here, go back out now. So at this point here, when I get to that like 100 kilometer mark, now it says Landsat Copernicus. So this is Copernicus. This is a land satellite. This is a guy who floats around the Earth and just basically takes pictures of the surface and sends them back to Earth, and we piece them together. So that's the Copernicus's job. So that's a special satellite there just for that. All right, so let's go out to. I'm gonna go out here. Okay, about 100 or 1,000 kilometers out here. So let's see if we can pick out anything without putting on our labels. I can definitely, as far as natural structures, I can still see quite a few of those. You got some big rivers that you can see here and here. You do have some larger lakes right up here and some sprinkled in through there. These big blue bodies of water over here are actually the Great Lakes. So you have Duluth, which is actually right there. And this is Lake Superior up here in this corner, and this is Lake Michigan here. So some of the other things that we can see, I know to you it probably doesn't look like much, but right here, that's Minneapolis. All right, that's the cities. This is Mankato. This kind of sandy looking blob down here is Sioux Falls. This is Fargo. I'm going to move this over just a tad right here. If you got a guess, this is a big, big city, even bigger than Minneapolis, right next to Lake Michigan. That is Chicago. All right. So you can see some like larger cities and stuff at this level. So that would be the only thing that I would put under man-made or human-made structures. But for the most part, it is all natural structures. So rivers, kind of, river type terrain, grasses, I guess you could say grasslands. That's this area kind of over here. Okay, and then so the very last one I think that we have is the 10,000 kilometer mark. So we'll go out, and you can see that this is obviously taken from Landsat Copernicus again. So I'm going to go out to, wrong way. Okay. So this here, you can see our tiny little dot. That's where our classroom is. And so in this view, as far as human-made structures, I don't know if you can even see anything that's human-made. So you could probably leave that one blank. Natural-made structures, you can see the oceans. You can see the entire North American continent. You can see mountains and terrain. These are the Rocky Mountains here. These are like the Appalachian Mountains here. You can definitely see all the Great Lakes now. You can see islands. You can see the Gulf of Mexico. So these are just some of the, things that you can write down. You don't have to have necessarily everything written down there. All right. So now we'll go ahead and kind of zoom all the way back in. Adjust this a little bit. There we are. Ooh, right back in there. Okay. All right. So this is what I really wanted to kind of show you when it happened with the Google Earth. We'll use Google Earth a little bit more in the future as well. Kind of cool. Okay. So let's go back to our sheet here. And then right underneath that, we're going to take some notes. All right, so this is just some information to have you guys write down. Again, this can go right underneath the paper that you glued in here. Probably need about 4 or 5 lines for this. So aerial photos, those are the ones that are taken with airplanes that fly over locations. Sometimes people think they're drones, but drones usually can't go that high unless you're talking about more like military drones, but they don't usually use those for aerial photos. But so aerial photos are taken with airplanes that fly over locations. They do something what's called kind of mowing the lawn. And it's literally like going back and forth. Like if you watch my cursor here, I go back and forth over a certain area, just like this. All right. Images taken above the 20,000 meter mark. Some of them can go higher. Some of the planes can go higher. But 20,000 roughly. I think one of them might have been over that. But images taken above the 20,000 meters then use satellites. So that was that Copernicus that I was showing you. So just some things to come away with when it comes to human-made structures versus man-made structures. As your altitude increases, human-made structures become less visible. So towns, roads, those were a lot of the human-made structures that we mentioned. They become less and less visible. And natural structures become more visible. If you remember from that very first image when we were just 100 meters above the ground, there all we could really see was man-made structures, the building, the cars, pavement, parking lot. Those are things that we saw just at that very first one. But again, as we increased our altitude, that became more and more visible as far as natural structures. All right. If your sub needs to pause this at all so you guys can finish, they can do that. Otherwise, I'm going to move on. All right, so this will be on a new page. And go ahead and put the title up there. New page here. So investigation 1.1, school to space. So just going to write down a couple things about how we come up with that idea of where we're located. As you can see, I could zoom way in and zoom way out, but depending on our frame of reference, it could depend on where I am. So a person's location can be described in quite a few ways, depending on their frame of reference. So we talked about frame of reference in a previous couple pages. Frame of reference is like your point of view or your position. So if I were to ask you where you live, you could, without me, asking you in terms of frame of reference, you could give me a couple answers. You could give me your street address. You could say Sleepy Eye. You could say Minnesota. You could say North America or United States. Those are all different acceptable locations. Now, if I asked you what state do you live in, then the only really acceptable answer for that is Minnesota. If I asked you what city do you live in, the only acceptable answer for that is Sleepy Eye. Or some of you might be out of town, but you get the same idea. Okay. So state and country are two frames of reference. Again, if I were to ask you specifically what state or what country that you are in, you would have to be specific and tell me. All right. So again, street address is another one there. City is another one you could list down. We're not going to go and list down all of them, but you get the idea of what constitutes a frame of reference. All right. So one thing that I want us to talk about here was our cosmic address. And, before that. So a person's location can be specific or it can be listed as kind of more general. So again, specific would be more like your city, your street address. Your street address would be like the most specific, right? Otherwise, more general could just be Minnesota or United States. Just really kind of depends. So again, one of our questions that we had, I think it was the very first question on our entry survey level thing that we did was, what is your cosmic address? And a lot of you were thrown off by that because if I ask you what your address is, you're probably fine giving me that. But cosmic address is a little bit odd in terms of wording. But all your cosmic address is your position in the universe that extends beyond Earth. And so we're going to go through and write down our our full cosmic address so we all have that. And I'm just going to use the school's address here. But this is a vocabulary word, so please go ahead and highlight that. All right. So our full on cosmic address of our classroom is going to start with this. All right. So I'm going to use kind of these arrows, as like, going on to the next one. So that's what you guys can kind of do here too as we write these in here. So we're starting in room 113. So that's my room number, the room that you guys are in. And, I think that's probably about as specific as we want to get. You could maybe even go as far as to list your table number or your seat number too. But in terms of something that it can apply to everybody, everybody's in room 113 right now, except for me. But so room 113. And then the next thing to note is where is that? So that would be our street address, which you'll want to write down here. So that our street address for the school is 400 4th Avenue Southwest. And then the rest of this for now is just similar to a mailing address. Arrows, Sleepy Eye, I'm just going to use Minnesota's abbreviation. I don't think the zip code is necessary here. The zip code is really just to help us find Sleepy Eye, so it's not necessary to probably list that. So now it becomes, well, what is Minnesota a part of? So the next biggest thing would be the United States. And then you could even go like North America or continent. Okay. And so that took us out to kind of like where we ended in terms of the Google uh, sh- you know, showing that I had for you guys is we went all the way out to the point that you could see the entire, entirety of North America. Now, North America is part of what? That would be Earth. Okay. And now we really get into the cosmic kind of part of this. So, again, the first half of this is probably known to you. And then we kind of get more into specifics with the country and the continent. And then we end at Earth. And is that it? Or can we go farther? We can go farther. So, our next one will be the solar system. That is what we are a part of. You're the third planet in our solar system. Okay. And our solar system is part of a larger collection of other solar systems, which is part of the Milky Way galaxy. And the Milky Way galaxy is part of the universe. Now, sometimes we'll get specific and say something like observable universe and unobservable universe, but for us, just universe is fine. Okay. So, I mean, obviously, that's not something that you'd want to write down on a letter every time or fill in your information. It's not necessary. But that is our cosmic address in terms of the entire universe. All right. So let's go back to your focus question. So flip back a couple pages and go to our after answer here. And so the question was, where are you when you're in science class? Okay. Now, I don't necessarily need our whole entire cosmic address for this. All I really need you to do, and you can use like your before answer, you just really need to add like the frame of reference. All right. So I have kind of a setup here that you can use to help you make an answer to your for this after question here. So it says using the blank as the frame of reference, my position is. So it just depends on how you want to answer it. Do you want to answer it in terms of where are you in like as in terms of the table and the spot in the room, or do you want to answer it in terms of the building, like where are we, where's the science classroom in terms of the building? Do you want to answer it in terms of like the street address? So again, if you want to answer it in terms of the room, then you would fill in the word room right here. Okay, so using the room as a frame of reference, my position is table 6, spot whatever I have down there, probably 23 or something like that. Okay. You could also do using the building as a frame of reference. My position is room 113. That's another way you could do it. Okay. You could also do using the city as a frame of reference. My position is, and then you could write down our street address, 400 4th Avenue Southwest. Okay, so I'll let you figure out what you want to do in terms of that. Like I said, you can use the same answer that you had before there. I just want you to include a frame of reference in terms of what your position is. So, using the building as a frame of reference, or the room as a frame of reference, or the city. All right. I'm going to have your teacher pause it here until everybody is complete. Okay, so moving on to our next focus question, we are going to get into investigation 1.2, which is titled Earth Systems. And here is our focus question. Why is Earth described as a system? And you know the deal. Do your before answer, do your after, and leave some spaces. So your teacher can pause this so you guys can go ahead and write this down. Okay. So why is Earth described as a system? I kind of also talked to you guys a little bit when you were filling out your entry-level survey questions about what a system is. And I gave you some examples of systems and how a lot of systems kind of work together to make up a bigger system. So maybe you use some of that in your ideas there. So that's good. If we look, go ahead and do a separation line here on this same page as we usually do. So I'll go ahead and do a separation line. We're just going to describe some words here and go over some examples. So we have this word system, and I've already kind of hinted as what we, what this is, but here's the technical, getting out of hand here. A set of interacting parts forming a larger, more complex group. A set of interacting parts forming a larger, more complex group. So system is broken down into parts, and we talked about subsystems and what those might be. But let's just talk about, some examples that we might see in terms of either science, earth science related and non-earth science related. So I mentioned this one. Your skeletal system and your digestive systems are parts of your body systems that work together in organisms. All right. And those are just two of them. Humans have 11 body systems. Most other organisms have about the same. There's a few organisms that differ, but as far as mammals go, we all have about the same number of body systems there. So 11 systems. Skeletal and digestive are just two examples of those. So those are two, systems that each of them have their own parts, but they're part of a larger, more complex group. That complex group being the organism, the living organism. And you can't survive without one of those systems. If you don't have a skeletal system, you don't move, you don't get held up, you just don't exist. If you don't have a digestive system, you can't eat. If you don't have a respiratory system, you don't breathe. If you don't have a cardiovascular system, your body can't pump blood. I mean, it's just impossible to be a living organism without all of those. Now, in terms of, a non-scientific example, if that helps some of you kind of think this through, like an engine and a transmission in a car, both of those are two separate systems that work together in a more complex group. So they interact, and both of them are broken down into like different parts. There's definitely different parts to the engine, definitely different parts to the transmission. And both of them, however, you cannot work without, have one without the other. All right. And so Earth is a system that is made up of interacting parts, much like some of these examples that we've talked about. And so we refer to that as a subsystem, which is smaller systems that make up a larger system. So I'm going to go ahead and highlight this. So Earth as a system itself. Sometimes we don't think of it that way because it seems like so big and like it's just there and it's not really doing anything. Much like, it's easier to kind of think of your different body systems or a car, parts and things like that because they're more conceivable. But Earth definitely is made up of several systems that work together. And so those systems that we can break them down into are called subsystems. So those are smaller systems that make up a larger one. Again, the skeletal and digestive ones would be the subsystems. The engine and transmission would be subsystems. Okay, so your teacher can pause it here if anybody needs more time. All right, I'm going to have you go to the next page and, just ignore all this. You already wrote this. Oops, excuse me. Okay, so if you want to, you can go ahead and write this up on top. This will be on a new page. This has to go on a new page because you have a sheet of paper that needs to go underneath here. So same title, Investigation 1.2, Earth's Systems. And if you want to put this as a title, you can. And what you have, I gotta pull this up here. Give me a sec. All right. So your teacher can hand out this. This is a sheet that should be cut in half and ready for you to glue into your notebook. All right. So I will have your teacher pause the video here while you guys get your written stuff here. Get this glued in and get the title up there. Okay, so once you have this glued in, I want us to focus on these right here. So these are the 4 interactions or the 4 systems that interact. And actually, I would like you to highlight each one of these. I was going to have you write out the definitions, but they're already on here. So we're just going to go ahead and highlight them. So geosphere. Okay, the geosphere includes the system of rocky material that makes up Earth, including the core, mantle, and crust. So it includes like mountains, it includes soil, it includes, literally rocks and gravel. Anything like that is part of the geosphere. It would include, structures like the Grand Canyon and, you know, uh, any sort of hills or something like that would all be part of the geosphere. Again, the core and mantle, those are things that are located underneath the earth. That is also included in the geosphere. All right, the atmosphere. We've actually learned a lot about the atmosphere already. So it's a system of gases that surround the earth. We've also learned quite a bit about the hydrosphere. That includes all the water that's found on the earth, including solid water, aka ice, liquid water, and gas water vapor. And then finally, the 4th and final sphere is the biosphere. And notice how all of these end in sphere, 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 sphere. Now, the beginning part of the word kind of gives you a hint as to what it's about. The word geo stands for like geology, all right, which is the study of Earth's materials and rocks. Atmosphere, as we know, is gases. Hydro is water. Bio is living things. In a couple of years from now, you'll be in biology with Mrs. Reinertz, and that's where that comes from. So the biosphere includes interactive living organisms on Earth. All right, so now what we're going to do is I'm going to project a series of images, and you are going to look at those images and put an X in the box if you think that the geosphere is seen in that image, if the atmosphere is seen in that image, the hydrosphere, and the biosphere. Okay, and then evidence of interactions. So in this one, I just want you to, kind of write down what, which of them are interacting and what is your example of that or what is your evidence of that. So we'll do one together so you have an idea of what we want to see. All right, so they are, I'm just going to find them here. There we go. All right, so this is the very first image here. This is actually taken from a place in within the Grand Canyon. And so the first one is geosphere. Do we see the geosphere involved here? Yes, you can see layers of rocks for sure. Do you see the atmosphere involved here? I mean, it's there. We can kind of assume that it is, but I don't necessarily know that I see it directly. So that's a maybe, hydrosphere, definitely. I see the water there. In biosphere, you can see some plants along the tree lines here. So for sure, we have all 3 of them, visible here. So I guess I would go ahead and check geosphere, hydrosphere, and biosphere. Oops, sorry. Okay. And then what is our evidence here? We have a waterfall going over rocks with living plants nearby. And I'm going to change my font size on here so I can fit that in there. Okay. So you can kind of see what to expect from that right there. All right. So let's try picture number 2. All right. So it looks like a sunset picture of a lake. So as far as the geosphere goes, there's probably, this is an island, so maybe you make a case for geosphere. Definitely biosphere because you can see the plants there. Hydrosphere for sure. Atmosphere, I would say yes too. I mean, you can definitely see clouds in the sky. That gives you a clear idea that the gases are there and water vapor is there too. So I would go ahead and mark all of them for this one. And as far as our evidence of interaction, you have an island with trees in a lake with visible clouds at sunset. So you just want to make sure that your description includes, pretty much anything that goes along with those, 4 or 3, in the first case, interactions that you're seeing. Okay. So I'm going to pause the video here, and if there's more time left in class, you can continue on to the next video to watch the rest of it. If not, we'll just pause it here.